Thank you, everyone. Summary. Let's start with some tech issues. There we go. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to the organizers for having me, all of you for being here. I am Jen. I'm Jen Grasso. I'm an archivist at the University of Brighton Design Archives. As Rosa said, I'm also a Photobooth technician and co-founder of this community archive project that I will introduce to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about photobooths, how this project started, particularly this collection of photographs, and then I will talk about my selected indicative image to represent the project. So, for 100 years, people have been photographing themselves in photobooths. Primarily associated with identification photography, photobooths are often found in train stations, supermarkets, and shopping centers. Everyday locations where everyday people do everyday things. Photobooth pictures are also popular souvenirs, and booths are often located in bars and restaurants, arcades, amusement parks, on piers, boardwalks, and other leisure and tourist destinations worth documenting with a visit to a photobooth. Photobooth pictures are highly collectible, particularly strips from inventor Anatole Josephus' Photomaton from the 1920s, or the Mutisville Company's photomatic portraits from the 30s and 40s, which are individually framed, and which we just saw in the last presentation, so that kind of proves my point. Collectors might even revel in finding legendary honeycomb paneling in collections, a textured, dimpled, black and white paper used in the mid-20th century, paper which has long stopped being produced for photobooths. Discussions of photobooth photography generally fall in one of two categories, art photography or found objects, but the collection I'd like to share today is inspired and informed by the profession of photobooth technician. In 2015, I purchased an analog photobooth and placed it in a vintage clothing store in central Brighton. Shortly after that, Marco Ferrari, fellow photobooth technician and artist, asked for one of my test strips for his collection. It was a tray, one of mine for one of his. A test strip is a picture taken by the technician, during a regular maintenance visit, usually once or twice a week. It's used to assess the stance of a booth, diagnose issues, as well as determine if any problems have been troubleshooted successfully. And so seen here from left to right is Ferrari's test strip, then in the start of a roll of paper, cold chemistry, expired chemistry, and hot chemistry. When analog booths were still manufactured, technicians were required to submit test strips from each booth they maintained on a weekly basis as proof of a job well done. This could total up to 100 strips per week, depending upon the number of machines on one's route. Test strips that were not submitted were often discarded, no longer needed. Today, technicians amass hundreds of photographs of themselves annually, and some of these adorn posters or are used in social media campaigns, but for the most part, they join hundreds of other strips just like it, their purpose now exhausted. Except for my one test strip, which joined Ferrari's collection, a collection over 15 years in the making. Ferrari began collecting test strips when working on a project that involved him traveling around the world to photograph people in booths. Spending that much time near public photo booths meant that eventually a technician would come along, and Ferrari started collecting their test strips as well, offering one of them in return as thanks, a practice he continued after becoming a technician himself. Little did I know then, but that collection of test strips would become one half of the Photobooth Technicians Project. The Photobooth Technicians Project is a community archive project that documents the profession of analog photobooth technician before the technology and thus the profession become obsolete. There's little information about the people who work with photobooths, since most company records are obscured behind private lines or have been destroyed, not worthy of long-term preservation. Analog photobooths are no longer manufactured. Production ceased at the end of the 20th century, but there are enough existing parts and supplies to fuel a grassroots community who are maintaining roughly 200 booths in 11 countries around the world. The Tech Project is informed by both archival and oral history methodologies and works within Andrew Flynn's definition of community archives, grassroots activities that document a community's history and heritage through community participation, control, and ownership. The impetus comes from members of the community itself. Communities are self-defined, often by location, common interest, or in our case, profession, and exist in both physical and virtual spaces. Materials are both analog and digital, constructed as well as ephemeral, and can be distributed across many locations. So the project consists of Ferrari's aforementioned collection of test strips, which are paired with semi-structured interviews. And since beginning this project in 2021, we have interviewed over 50 technicians, past and present. The interview consists of 11 questions. Simple enough for those who have little time or whose first language isn't English, but open-ended enough to allow for stories to emerge, and we've conducted these in person, via email, on the phone, using video conferencing, and in social media chats, any way that accommodates the interviewee. Together, these interviews and test strips document not only the profession, but also the person and their unique experiences, how they got into the business, what they have learned working with Photobooth, and what they bring to the profession that can help others. To add to this, we have a growing collection of newspaper articles, advertisements, patents, company registration records, manuals, and other Photobooth ephemera, both physical and digital, from the last 100 years. We are still collecting material, and new technicians are regularly joining the ranks, meaning this is still an active, ongoing project, but we hope one day to deposit everything somewhere so it can be made accessible outside the community. I will be honest, it was extraordinarily difficult to pick just one image from this entire collection to represent all of the people that we spoke with and all of the things that we learned. But this is a portrait of and a test strip from a technician by the name of Mike van den Berg. And I picked Mike for many reasons. Mike was our first interviewee. He was an early member of the grassroots group of analog technicians that emerged in the wake of digital photography. Anyone working with analog booths since production stopped at the end of the 20th century has done so independently, and gradually these independent networks have become the grassroots community that exists today. Mike was also an early contributor to the online directory photobooth.net, which provides locations of photobooths around the world, one of the main resources that the community uses, and where this grassroots group first emerged 25 years ago with the help of Web 2.0. Mike is one of the few participants who worked for the company Autophoto Limited, one of the two major companies that dominated the market from the 1950s on, the other being PhotoMe, which is still in operation today, only digitally. Mike was able to provide insight into Autophoto, helping us understand how the company operated. Mike created a training video that many of my colleagues and I have learned from. It's the only resource of its kind and still widely used because it helps explain the many complexities of these machines. It also provides insight into Mike's role as a supervisor in charge of a fleet, the technicians under his care. Mike had 22 machines in Phoenix, Arizona region, and he created the video to help train his team. Little did he know that this training video would go on to help technicians over 4 years later. Mike began working with booths at a restaurant and family attraction called Chuck E. Cheese, an indoor soft play with arcade and fast food restaurant that was a mainstay of 90s and 90s American culture. I just have to say it aside, I'm really impressed. I mean, I should have wrangled this into a talk. A far cry from the arcades where the first photo booth was installed in New York City in 1926, it highlights one of the main ways photo booths are used as vending machine alongside arcade games in tourist and specialty destinations, but people are supposed to be having fun and making memories. Mike also serviced booths in prisons, where they were used to document prisoners while waiting for the official lung shot photos to be processed. There is no better example to illustrate the hegemonic application of identity photography the photo booth standardized portraits invite. With Mike, we have both ends of the spectrum, amusement and souvenir versus standardization, and the use of photography in law enforcement. And last, Mike's test strip is in color, and color photo booth photography is an almost obsolete medium. The supplies and chemistry are no longer made. A color test strip is rare in our collection. To the untrained eye, this looks like any other photo booth strip, but as a technician, Mike was testing for color balance, hence using both the red and blue curtains as well as the white background, and he would have been reporting the filter packs used to color balance when servicing this booth, checking the lights, exposure, and chemistry as well. For all of these reasons, I picked Mike to represent the Photobooth Technicians Project. Not every technician in the project, however, is as accomplished or has provided as much historical background as Mike. We have participants who worked for PhotoMe, providing comparable insight into their business operations. There are participants who rescued booths when both companies stopped working with analog altogether. But the majority of interviews are from people working today, photographers, engineers, mechanics, and artists, an otherwise curious and determined group of people who continue to tackle the challenge of keeping this technology alive. Analog photo booths today may no longer be used for ideal photography purposes. This job has been usurped by its digital counterparts, but booths are still found in tourist and specialty destinations, in bars and restaurants, and have amassed quite a loyal following, thanks to social media trends which have introduced this technology to new and younger audiences. Photobooth portraits have long been part of everyday photography collections, and thanks to the effort of the community, they will continue to be. So for those here who have photobooth pictures in their collections, I'm sure many have wondered who these people were or what they were doing before and after they took these photos. There will be strips from people who didn't wait long enough, strips that were ripped up or shared, a frame or two lost in the process. Maybe some pictures fell out of wallets, were taken out of photo albums, or part of old IDs. However, some of the photobooth pictures that have made it into collectors' hands could very well be the discarded test strips from technicians themselves. Thank you.